Hello, this is Will with the Accidental Nihilist. It's been several months since I posted something on this channel, and quite a lot has come by, more than I can even sum up. I suppose right off the bat, since I've had some questions about it, let me describe what I mean philosophically by nihilism. It doesn't mean pessimism. In fact, philosophically speaking, believe it or not, I am an optimist. I have kind of Adorno's reading of Hegel in this regard, that although Hegel seemed to think that progress was written into the very fabric of reality as a succession of definite historical eras, we know after the 20th century that that's not quite the case, much less now. But in the long term, ultimately, if humanity survives, reason will become the integral deduction of history, and I think ultimately there's a lot to look forward to in the future, assuming that, as I said, we don't blow ourselves up or destroy the earth to the point that we're reduced to primitive societies and so on. And by nihilism, I don't even mean anti-metaphysics. Certainly, the old metaphysics is something that no longer holds water. When we hear people espousing traditional metaphysics, much less religious cosmology and all that, we react to it the way that one should react to it. We roll our eyes and shake our head and pass it off as so much nonsense. But Hegel demonstrates, not to keep on going on about Hegel, but that any statement already contains within itself a metaphysical relationship to meaning. And I think it behooves us to indulge in healthy speculation whenever we can, whenever such issues demand it. I think that an absolute rejection of speculative or metaphysical thinking, in a more generous sense of the term, will reduce us to a banal, crude materialism, which itself hides the metaphysical view of things. Hegel demonstrates quite well in the phenomenology. And we should keep a speculative attitude towards, what life means and infinity and all those sorts of things, which I'm not going to discuss now, but I will in the future. Nihilism does, however, mitigate against religion. One can have a post-God theology, I suppose, a negative theology, which would not be at odds with a nihilistic view. But religion itself, with a personal God, cannot escape its own internal nihilistic void, which we can discuss in a future video. The point of the matter is that there is no foundation for meaning. There is no ultimate basis for anything to be what it is other than this interchange of fluidity, which can only be comprehended at a certain point within a kind of a give and take of becoming. That's just the way it is. One shouldn't draw a moral conclusion from that or an immoral conclusion from it. One reacts to it the way one will react to it. That's your character and your inherent comportment to reality will show what it is in relation to those things. You either be a intellectual coward or a opportunist or a narcissist or an artist or a humanitarian or what have you. In this regard, I fully affirm Nietzsche's take on the matter. In any case, several years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, in New Orleans, I had begun a journal, and one of the hurricanes, I think it was Ivan, came into town, and I had to leave my place for a few days, and I hid this journal somewhere. I don't know why. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it until I actually moved back to New York. And when I did find it, I read the first several pages of the thing, and they were so outdated, the references, that I snipped them out. And once I do that, it kind of takes the magic away from the book. So I decided to take the book and repurpose it as kind of a polemical diary of sorts, which I began the day I returned to New York. You see this electrical tape I have here, whatever that is, covering over the ripped out pages, and I began this kind of polemic on first my observations of Long Island people, and then general examination, serious examination, finally, on what I termed the regime of ordinary consciousness. Just my luck. I saw as a case in point of the negative side of ordinary consciousness, Trump and the reformation of the white working class, which is now his solid base, getting more solid, stronger with every faux pas Trump makes, drawing said people, wittingly or unwittingly, more and more into a dangerous, precarious situation where they could easily give a nod to, at its worst, neo-fascism. I think that is absolutely possible. The sad fact of the matter, though, is that I don't think there can be any positive solution to American politics today unless that very element, the reactionary white working class, becomes part of the progressive community. I know that seems an impossible thing to do now, but without that, there'll be no hope for the United States or any like nation in the first world. Part of the dilemma with regard to that issue is that there is no left in the United States. The Democratic Party, for example, is just another gang of pro-corporate professional class types vying against the traditional corporate blue blood type parties. They're just vying over corporate dollars, and Democrats have long ago turned their back on not just the white working class, but pretty much all progressive issues outside of ones that really don't cost anything. You know, bathroom access and all that kind of thing. Parenthetically, I would recommend a book by Thomas Frank, famous for What's the Matter with Kansas, excellent book even now. But Listen Liberal, I recommend it highly. It makes us right to the point right away. I was at a little group meeting with a bunch of friends and colleagues last night, in the course of which conversation, not that I needed to be disabused of my thoughts to the contrary, but I realized the extent to which, again, I think unwittingly on their part, how much the more or less intellectual class, maybe not quite the best word, but you know, the thinking public, these are all, I think, really without exception, college-educated people, some professionals, people with expertise in various things from science to what have you. But I was disappointed, I guess, the extent to which they bought into what we traditionally would call bourgeois thinking about society and politics and so on. For example, just bringing up the name of Marx was a huge red flag, even though almost no one reads Marx. I mean, most people, when they parrot what they think Marx is about, say things that could be written in a National Review. It's a big change from even, you know, the 80s, where there was still some discourse. Marx was still assumed to be an important thinker. But with the narrowing of American intellect even more than when it was first diagnosed, people of the category that I'm speaking about have become very sheepish and afraid of strong opinions. Of course, I exaggerate on the other side just for rhetorical reasons, not that I don't mean what I say, but, you know, for example, you know, the feigned horror over the excesses of French Revolution and Robespierre. Well, then I have to say, well, what do you expect? It's a revolution. Yeah, but then you're, you know, you're doing categorizations of a whole people by class. Well, yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. You know, what about the, you know, the guillotine, all those heads that roll? Yeah, well, I mean, once you unleash that kind of violent reaction to things, you have to expect that the dogs of war, you cannot rein in until they just run out of steam. That's just how it is. I still hold the whole French Revolutionary period in very high regard, personally. Not that we can have that here, not that we should, not that we could. It's a different historical circumstance. We never had the kind of harsh class structure that you know, the ancient regime had in France. At least not yet. You know, the whole notion of revolution, for example, it seems so outlandish to almost everybody that brings up the subject or with whom I bring it up. Slavoj Žižek made this observation. You know, we can think of you know, colonies on Mars and you know, the world being one big ocean, or you know, cybernetics and all kinds of outlandish things. These things are, but you criticize the economy, you know, capitalism at all, and people can, well, you know, you're how could you possibly even challenge that? You know, it's really, it's a tragic, silly problem that we have. I suppose what I'm really getting at, and perhaps I'm going back to the question of what I mean by nihilism and what I don't mean by it, is that we have to restore the certain space of freedom of thinking and even the right to insult and to shock, because we seem to have lost our capacity to be bold in our thinking and discourse, self-critical to the point of, you know, disabusing ourselves of all of these hidden ideologies that we enact just to be nice or seem nice in the face of some mythic onlooker, maybe not so mythic anymore. And without that capacity to just, well, to use the vernacular, to have balls, that alone mitigates against any hope for positive change. Anyway, thank you.